A police officer doesn't just vanish. But if one does, what really happened that night? Hidden Echoes takes you back through every detail, every overlooked clue to uncover the truth behind a disappearance whose silence still echoes today. This is the story of Lieutenant Darnell Hawkins. Sives, brother, a son, a man who served his community, and the mysterious disappearance that happened right where he once swore to protect and serve. Baton Rouge isn't a big city, but it's big enough that every neighborhood has their person. And in East Riverbank, that person was Darnell Hawkins. He wasn't just a police officer, he was Darnell from the Hawkins family. The guy handing out water at youth football games. The one fixing squeaky bike brakes for the neighborhood kids. The same man who walked home every evening beneath the old oak trees lining the same street his family had lived on for 3 generations. The Hawkins house sat at the end of Oakwood Street, a blue-roofed home, not fancy, but carefully kept. It was where Darnell's grandmother once served. Vanilla cookies every Sunday afternoon. His mother, Miss Eloise, a retired nurse everyone affectionately called Mama Hawkins, still arranged sunflowers on the balcony because Darnell always loved sunflowers, she'd say. Baton Rouge has long lived in the shadow of both policing and violence. But maybe that's why someone like Darnell mattered so much. He didn't shout slogans. He didn't chase headlines. He walked his beat, sat and played chess with old men on their porches. To the black community in East Riverbank, Darnell was living proof that justice wasn't just about a badge or a gun. It was about showing up, listening, and making people feel safe in their own neighborhood. Born in 1987, Darnell was the middle of 3 siblings. His father, Marcus, passed away young from heart disease. Darnell grew up fast, stepping into the role of man of the house before he was ready. He studied mechanics for a year, planned to open his own garage, but changed course after a close friend was wrongly arrested over a clerical mistake. "I didn't want to stand on the sidelines," he once said. "I wanted to be the one who stops that from happening." Despite his size and deep voice, Darnell had a quiet gentleness about him. He didn't speak up much during team briefings, but he was always the first to show if a colleague needed backup. Off-duty, he played bass in a small local jazz group, performing on weekends at a coffee shop near Keogh's Old Bridge. Within the department, he was respected for his calm professionalism and his rare empathy in a field often defined by toughness. Darnell never married. "Being a cop ain't great for dating," he joked. "I'm never off the clock." But his family knew there had once been someone. Amasas. Deep love that ended quietly years ago. Since then, he spent more time with his mom and younger sister. At home, he was the steady one. The listener, not one for flowery words, but always there when it counted. Those closest to Darnell used to say he wasn't afraid of anything. But a few weeks before he vanished, something changed. His mother noticed first. Darnell started keeping a personal flashlight in his car, one of those industrial-grade ones meant for emergencies. He'd never done that before. When she asked, he brushed it off. Just in case the car breaks down in a dark spot. "Mama." "Don't worry." His best friend, Malik, picked up on it too. One night, Darnell called him out of the blue, well past midnight, just to ask if you saw something, but didn't know if you should say it. "What would you do?" Malik laughed it off, figured Darnell was just stressed from work. But now, that question won't stop echoing in his. Shamed like a warning, no one stayed still long enough to hear. June 3rd, 2022. A blistering, sun-heavy Friday in Baton Rouge. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual hum of summer cicadas and a strange, unshakable tension in the air. Lieutenant Darnell Hawkins signed off duty at 6:40 p.m., slightly earlier than usual, having finished all his reports ahead of time. On his way home, he sent a quick text to his mother, "Heading home for dinner, save me a slice of that peach cobbler." It was his favorite dessert. One his mother only made on birthdays. At 6:58 p.m., a security camera at a gas station, 3 blocks from the precinct, recorded his patrol car pulling in. Darnell fueled up, bought a sports drink and a pack of mint candies. Nothing unusual. No one was with him. He wore his full uniform, nameplate Hawkins, clearly visible. He nodded at the cashier, who later recalled, he gave me this little smile like someone who was headed home. You could tell he was done for the day. But Darnell never made it home. At 7:36 p.m., his voice came through the radio one. Last time, heading around the curve, might stop by the riverside for a bit before circling back. His tone was calm. No distress. No alarm. That was the last time anyone heard his voice. At 10:22 p.m., when Darnell still hadn't shown up and wasn't answering his phone, his mother, Eloise, began calling the precinct. A desk officer suggested maybe he had stayed over at a friend's place or taken an extra shift. But Eloise knew better. He's never missed a birthday dinner, she said, and he always answers when I call, always. At 12:18 a.m., a patrol unit was dispatched to sweep the routes Darnell typically took home. Around 1 o'clock a.m., they found his cruiser abandoned on a quiet road leading toward the Bayou Goff riverbank, about 15 minutes from his house. The car was intact. The interior lights still on. The keys still in the ignition. Doors locked but undamaged. Darnell's phone sat neatly on the passenger seat. The screen was dark. No calls, no messages past 7:37 p.m. In the trunk, all standard issue gear was accounted for. Handcuffs, first aid kit, flashlight, area maps. Everything was there, except him. No other tire marks. No signs of a struggle. No skid, no scuffed prints in the soft dirt along the river's edge. The scene stunned the search team commander. It's like he stepped out of the car and just disappeared into the air. The official search began at sunrise. Rescue teams, K-9 units, helicopters, dozens of community volunteers combed the riverside. They searched every patch of grass, every muddy path, every thicket, clinging to hope that Darnell had passed out, slipped, or was hiding for some unknown reason. But there were no signs, no torn clothing, no footprints, no call for help, nothing. 3 days later, just as morale began to crack, some young volunteer named Ania spotted something half buried in the underbrush, more than 300 meters from where the car had been found. A heavy-duty flashlight, standard police issue, caked in mud, still faintly glowing, tilted to one side as if someone had just let it fall. The serial number confirmed it, Darnell's flashlight. Its location raised a chilling question. If he only planned to stop by the riverside, why would he be that far from the road with his flashlight on? And if something unexpected happened, why would the one tool meant to keep him safe in the get dark be left behind? That was the moment when a silent fear began to take hold. Maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe Darnell saw something he wasn't meant to see, and someone made sure he'd never be able to tell anyone about it. After Darnell's flashlight was found, the nature of the search shifted. It was no longer just a rescue mission. It became a quiet, unnamed investigation. His family pressed on. They hired private search crews, mapped the marshlands, and scanned every bend of the river. But they weren't just fighting the elements. They were fighting silence. No one officially said Darnell had been harmed, but no one could say he was just missing either. The police department's initial report concluded no signs of foul play, but what his family couldn't understand, what they refused to accept was this: all traffic camera footage from the roads near the Bayou Goff riverbank, the ones that were always on, somehow showed nothing. No footage of Darnell's cruiser entering, none of it leaving. Police claimed the cameras might have malfunctioned or had blind spots. But to Eloise Hawkins, that explanation was nonsense. Every night, I hear my son's voice in my head, she said. He didn't just wander off. That's not who he was. Not long after, a call came into the community tip line. The voice was male, soft, trembling. I don't know if I should say anything, but I saw a black car parked near the river that night. No license plates. The caller didn't leave a name. He only added, "Let it be. Don't let anybody else disappear." Then the line went dead. 2 months passed. That's when Malik, Darnell's childhood best friend, finally shared something with the family that shook them all. About 10 days before Darnell disappeared, he'd called Malik late one night. He wasn't making small talk. He was nervous, focused. He asked, if you found out something that could get people hurt, would you say anything? At the time, Malik thought Darnell was just venting after a hard shift. He gave a nonchalant answer, but depends on the situation, bro. But now, thinking back, Malik was sure Darnell was holding on to something heavy. Maybe it was something inside the department. Maybe something he saw on patrol, something he couldn't officially report. The Hawkins family also noticed a change in those final days. Darnell was more on edge. He double-checked the locks on his car, rechecked his rearview mirror before backing out of the driveway, something he'd never been overly cautious about before. One evening, Eloise watched him pause in the driver's seat, staring into the mirror. When she asked if something was wrong, he just shook his head and said softly, just a feeling. Mama. That's all. Less than a week later, he was gone. Midway through the second month, Eloise received a message from an unknown number. It wasn't in her contacts. The area code was local, but the number had never texted before. The message said only 3 words. He's still there. It came in at 2:14 a.m. The number vanished. No callback. No signal trace. Just gone. Eloise brought the message to the police, but there were no leads. No follow-up. Those words, he's still there, could have been hope or a threat. But Eloise was certain it wasn't a prank. Not when, just days before, she'd posted a private remembrance for Darnell on Facebook, visible only to close friends and family. So who saw it, and why send that message in the dead of night? At a community meeting held in the 10th week, as the media buzz began to fade, civil rights organizer took the microphone and said, when someone like Darnell disappears and no one's willing to speak up, maybe the problem isn't with him, but with the people working so hard to keep everything in the dark. And that darkness feels thicker every day. Winter comes slow to Baton Rouge. But on a damp, colder than usual morning in late November, a group of middle school students on a riverside ecology field trip discovered something buried beneath a fallen tree near Bayou Goff. One curious student reached down and pulled it. Free, a worn, pale leather wallet, damp but intact, buried in a layer of dead leaves and silt. Inside was a single piece of paper folded into quarters. Its edges were frayed as if it had been carried for a long time. No heading, no signature, just one line, handwritten in fading blue ink, rushed and uneven. I saw something I wasn't supposed to, so please, leave my family alone. The note was handed over to local authorities and sent for handwriting analysis. Preliminary results indicated a match with Darnell Hawkins's handwriting from personnel files. That finding was never officially released, but it leaked thanks to a volunteer who had been searching alongside the Hawkins family. And from that moment, everything began to shift. The public began to ask, what did Darnell see? Who frightened him enough to leave behind what felt like a final message buried in the woods? And why, after all this time, had law enforcement still made no meaningful progress? Eloise Hawkins spoke, publicly for the first time. I'm not saying my son was murdered, but I know he didn't walk away by choice. And I know someone out there knows what happened, but they've chosen silence. Faith in the system, already frayed, began to unravel. Former colleagues of Darnell started voicing frustration with the department's silence. One junior officer, speaking anonymously, shared, I worked shifts with him. He wasn't the type to imagine things. But those last 3 weeks, he changed. He was quieter, more guarded, always checking the patrol car after every shift. Then came another revelation. An internal report filed just 10 days before Darnell vanished showed that he had flagged concerns about unclear handling of evidence tied to a drug arrest in Westside. The report was dismissed as inconclusive, but to Darnell's friends, it felt like a turning point. Malik, his closest friend, was certain. Whatever it was, he saw it. And like always, He was trying to do the right thing. As the story gained momentum, an independent legal group offered the Hawkins family pro bono support to push for a federal disappearance investigation. But every request was delayed, stonewalled. No indication that authorities intended to pursue the matter further. And so, the man who had once stood for the system was now the name that system quietly left behind. In early December, a photo began circulating on a private forum for former Baton Rouge police officers. It was grainy, taken from a personal dash cam, not department issued. The timestamp read 7:41 p.m., June 3rd. In the image, a second patrol car appeared to be parked roadside, less than 400 meters from where Darnell's car was later found. No record of another unit being assigned to that location exists. The post vanished within hours. The user anonymous, but someone saved the image. When the Hawkins family was shown the photo, they went silent. Malik's voice broke the stillness. I can't say which unit that is, but Darnell never mentioned anyone else being on patrol that night. And then the question, sharp, undeniable. If Darnell wasn't alone that night, who was the other officer? And why, nearly 2 years later, has that answer been buried as if the truth itself is too dangerous to name? Because if that truth has the power to shake an entire system, then who among us will be brave enough to face it? On September 15th, 2023, more than 15 months since Darnell Hawkins disappeared, a volunteer group returned to the eastern banks of Bayou Goff. The area had already been marked as fully cleared. They weren't expecting new answers. They simply wanted to keep a promise to the family that Darnell wouldn't vanish as if he'd never existed. Regina, a retired nurse turned volunteer, was wading through thick reeds when she stumbled on something solid buried in the mud. It was a torn piece of a police uniform. The shoulder patch still bore silver. Thread, Hawkins, faded but legible. Nearby, between 2 leaning oak trees, they found a broken plastic badge fragment, the upper half of a police shield snapped clean down the middle. There was no body, nothing else. But no one called it evidence. The items were sealed and taken back to the precinct. 3 weeks later, the department issued a short statement. The recovered items, believed to belong to Lieutenant Darnell Hawkins, are under ongoing verification. No clear indicators of criminal activity were found. To the Hawkins family, that statement hurt more than an outright denial. It felt like someone knocking on your door in the middle of the night, only to say nothing and walk away. Eloise wasn't angry. She was just tired. My son worked here. He trusted that badge. And when he went missing, all they found was half. A badge and a name stitched in silver thread. She no longer asked, who did this? Now she asked, how do we make sure no one else disappears like this? 3 weeks later, a stone bench quietly appeared near the edge of Bayou Goff, close to where Darnell's patrol car was last seen. No plaques, no statue, just a simple bench facing the water, etched into the seat. He stood for something. He walked alone, but he was never forgotten. It became a place. People stopped by. An elderly man left wildflowers there every Monday morning. A group of students wrote Darnell's name in their journals for a class project on those who protect their community. And Malik, his best friend, came most weekends, sat in silence, watched the water pass. Slow, steady. No one officially declared Darnell murdered. No one had proof he'd walked away. But for those who knew him, lived with him, worked beside him, there was something clearer than any report. Darnell's disappearance wasn't random. It was the result of a system built to obscure what's inconvenient, and a society far too ready to forget those who quietly tried to do the right thing. At the 1-year memorial, Eloise didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, if you ask me what hurts the most, it's not knowing what happened. It's the feeling that my son disappeared in the Gasakitot, middle of the very community he tried to protect. Darnell may never be found, but his presence, in silence, in memory, in a bench by the water, has never left. If you knew someone in your community, someone once loved once stood up to protect others, and then, one day, they vanished without a trace. What would you do? That question isn't easy to answer. And for many in Baton Rouge, it's not a hypothetical anymore. It's their everyday reality. No clear leads, no confession, no suspect, only silence, long, deliberate silence, as if the truth itself was buried along with the person who carried it. Lieutenant Darnell Hawkins' disappearance didn't end like the movies. There was no big reveal, no courtroom confession, no justice served. But the scariest part isn't just that the truth was hidden. It's that so many people have started accepting that as if that's just how things are. Death or disappearance isn't the worst thing that can happen. Being forgotten is. And that's why we're telling this story. Not to point fingers, not to speculate, but to ask, how do we stop this community from losing another life to silence? If you've ever lost someone, if you've ever waited on a message, a phone call, or just one honest answer, then you understand. Thank you for watching, for listening until the very end. Hidden Echoes isn't just a channel for mysteries or missing persons. It's a space to remember the voices we were never supposed to forget, to sit with the silence and choose to hear what's in it. If Darnell's story made you think, if you saw a friend, a brother, a parent, or your own neighborhood in any part of this, you're not alone. There are thousands of others out there asking the same questions. Did I do enough to keep someone from slipping away? Was there a sign I missed? Leave a comment if you want to share. Write me too if you've ever felt like justice doesn't reach everyone the same way. And if you want to keep following stories like this, story's told not for drama, but for truth, hit follow. Because we may not be able to bring Darnell home, but we can make sure his name is never lost. Thank you for listening all the way through.